introduce myself. Mark is the past president of Color Marketing Group, which is the premier color forecasting association. It is an international association, and Mark was a leader of that group for a number of years. He is still a chairholder and very active in that program, so we're going to ask him about that. In addition, Mark is an incredibly talented interior designer who's worked on many beautiful residential homes, has shared some of his portfolio pieces with us. His clients lean into him to create their sacred spaces and just to create exceptional interiors. And based on all of the work that he's done in color forecasting throughout the years, Mark has had a very interesting career, today consulting with some of the largest brands out there in the world of hard surfaces, paint, etc., helping them create their future color palettes that we will all be living with in 2020 and beyond. They're forecasting, I think, at this point into 2022. So help me join Mark. Thank you again to each and every one of you for tuning in. And I see that Mark made the request. He is right on it, right from the beginning. So we are going to go live with my good friend while we're waiting to patch in our internet connection.
Boom! There we go.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing? Good evening to you and everybody else. Cheers.
Cheers. We're doing water. Yeah, I know. I do water in crystal. That's my.
I know. I can see both of us are in our crystal glasses with water.
It's my drink of choice these days. I'm trying to detox. I went 4 days without sugars, and that was it. And then my mother-in-law came over with banana bread, and that was the end.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good. We have people tuning in from Boston, I see. So,
cool.
So nice to see all of your beautiful names and icons show up tonight on this. So, again, Mark, welcome to Design Uncensored.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining. You were just so gracious to spend some time with us tonight. And, I have Guga. Look at this. We have a fan from Brazil who's tuning in right now. And Augusta, who I call Guga, is also in the world of fashion and forecasting. So I'm sure she is excited to hear what you have to say. So, again, thanks for tuning in, everyone. So talk to me. We had, the pleasure of catching up a little bit and talking shop. So let's just start with this. I know we met each other. We know each other from Color Marketing Group. So that's where we were first. We've stayed in touch. I followed your career throughout the years. Color Marketing.
Likewise.
Yes, the premier international color forecasting association. Mark took over at an interesting time. So he is a past president. And at the time, it was sort of on the cusp of where everything started to go digital. Now we're learning how to be virtual. But you really led these sort of more regional things called chromosomes, and that was something that you spearheaded at the time. So just tell us, in a nutshell, kind of how's it going virtually, and talk us through what's happening with the chromosomes right now.
It's been very interesting because we weren't sure, and I think it's one of the things that's been most astounding with Color Marketing Group, with the people that are in position now, in that we realized we had these chromosomes set up, and they were all around the country, I should say the region, North America, and we do Europe and Latin America and Asia Pacific, so they're all over the place, and realize, oh my gosh, we can't have these live. What are we going to do? So in a really short period of time, and have continued to evolve, figure out how we're going to do this virtually. How do we come together to share colors, to share the stories and the influences, the inspirations, everything into it? How do we do this live together? And we have to give a shout out to Zoom because goodness knows we've been using it.
That's right.
And it's been really interesting because I think initially people were concerned about not being in the same space physically and doing the sharing, but we've realized that we know we're not going to be doing that for the short term. But this was a great way of still doing that. We could see one another, we could chat with one another, we could have the conversations we've always had. The only thing missing is that we just weren't physically there, but the passion was still there. And when the workshops were finished, everyone would sort of say afterwards, wow, I just feel so invigorated by this, and I'm so happy I could share these moments with everyone. So that one little element is missing.
Color does that, right? So you get a group of people, whether we're real in the flesh or we're doing these virtual, talking about the thing that we're so impassioned by, and being able to bring color to people's homes. And, you said something that really triggered me, because I know you do a lot of mentoring, and triggered me in a good way, like really made me feel good. So I know that word could be a double-edged sword, but in a good way. Because you do a lot of mentoring and teaching of young people. And, you mentioned something about how when you go into the field of design, when you use design and form and shape and space and color as your palette as a designer, what a big deal that is. So just share a little bit kind of, how you pose that. But it really was sort of an awakening, also the way that you had framed it about how important this job is.
Well, it's a blessing, and I take it very much so on a day-to-day basis, not only with my clients, but I get to travel, as we've known each other doing that as well. I get to travel and speak and share sort of the gospel of color and design. And I've done a number of design schools quite a number over the years, and I always thank them and commend them for following a course of design, for following what their passion is and looking into that, because we always have to remind ourselves at the end of the day, and this is true for commercial as well as residential. Commercial could be a little faceless. We may not know everyone that will eventually engage in a commercial space, but you still put that in there. But certainly I can speak to residential. You are affecting someone's life in a positive way. And I'll tell really quickly a story. It came from a client I had who's become a very dear friend over the years, who had gone through a rather messy personal situation. And we'd been traveling, family. We'd been out of the country for holidays one year. And we came back to a voicemail message saying that she wanted to greet us she was calling us on Christmas Eve, and she hopes we're having a nice time, and that her children had just left to go be with the father. And she was just sitting in her newly designed space, and we're like tearing up because we're thinking, she's alone on Christmas Eve, it's so sad. And then she says, and I just want to call you and tell you how much you've meant to me, because my home truly feels mine now. And this is the first holiday I've celebrated as my home, and it wouldn't have been there without your help. And it just floored us. Yeah. Because you always think you're helping someone, but when someone calls and says, this has made a difference in our life, and I think that really put it in my head that we have that duty, we have that responsibility and that honor to, as practicing designers, but then also I tell this to students coming up, this is something you get to do in future, is affect someone's life in a positive way. And it doesn't have to be the whole space. It could be if you're designing a product, if you're designing a light fixture or a wall covering or something that brings somebody a moment of joy. Yes. Hopefully many moments of joy. That we have that. And I think it's one of the most amazing gifts that I've received in this life, that I get to do something like that for people. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm telling you, when you said it, it was just like such you're right. So many of us, and while we're going through this, we have those moments where we go, what are we doing? Is this important? Where are things today? And to take those moments and remember that being a designer is an honorable job. It is a chosen career. It is one of those things that does impact people in their life holistically in a way that, excellent design does sort of recede into the background. It becomes, the backdrop to the life well lived. But when you have that, to your point, honor to do that for people, it is a gift to live your life that way.
Very much so.
I know color, makes a huge impact in the interior spaces you design. It impacts all of us. We like to say a color marketing group, what color is the first thing that a consumer sees, right? It catches your eye. How fast? You've done the talks.
Oh, well, it's instantaneous, and it always comes back to them. We know this over and over and over again, that almost 85% of every consumer decision is based on color. Yeah. And
before you see anything else, it's the color that attracts you to it.
You see the color.
What's coming up? I mean, what is coming out of these chromosomes? You can't sort of ignore the new reality. How are people looking to live with color today and into the future? Because you're forecasting for 2022.
2022, and we're just actually working right now this week on the finalizing and trying to get the steering committee in that. So I can't give away too much because we won't be releasing it until November at our international
You
summit.
can tell us.
But
give us the general. Give us. You don't have to give us NCS colors, but you can give us.
What we're seeing and have seen up to this point is an interesting take, and that there's no color left untouched. Pretty much, that people still have to gravitate to that which makes them comfortable and gives them a sense of solace, a sense of renewal, a sense of comfort. All those key words that you would sort of expect to find are still there. In my own research, as I do it privately, I'm finding that the same. And there's still a little bit of a breakout that some people want to be comfortable and be familiar and have familiarity. And I want these give me colors that I feel comfortable in, that I can have it all the time. And then others are coming back and going, you know what? I need to break out of the box. This is This whole time period I've been trapped in the house and I can't look at this anymore. Make this new. What can I have that's different and new and exciting? So it's interesting that these parallel tracks at one time, all hitting, it's like, what do we have at the end of this when we come out of all this stuff? This is how I want to live and how I want to be. So it's been interesting to see that there's not been any one key color that we think, oh my God, this is absolutely the end all and be all of everything.
But you and I did talk a little bit, behind the scenes, because of course I was, poking to say, all right, come on, give me a hint. We've talked, and I mentioned this at most of our Design Uncensored because I want to get the pulse on it. I mean, when you look at how color trends, and it's funny because I remember being in a chromosome workshop in Chicago at the Dow Tile showroom. So we had one in conjunction with Neocon at the time. And it was when we started to see, gray was really becoming, this color of choice. And just the conversation about how critical it is to make the right color decisions depending on the material. And you're with a backpack company, or whatever, you're in fashion, right? So you're going to come up with the next season. But if you're working for Dow Tile, and they're not sponsoring this, but, they've been an active member of color marketing for years, so they've hosted many chromosomes. You're making decisions on something. People are laying tile with a mud floor. That's not getting ripped out. I mean, so you can't be so aggressive ahead of the curve on color. So gray, kind of coming back to the circle here, gray started to emerge. I remember going like, it was very neutral. It was beige at that point. All of a sudden you start seeing gray, and they're saying, yes, no, we're for it. When you hear tile companies are committed to these shades, you can sort of put your money in the bank. I mean, if it's going to be happening in tile or sort of these hard surface materials, that's going to have longevity, right? So that's been around now for 12 years?
Actually, 2007, 2008 was when it first started to emerge.
Right.
Within our world, and a little bit later as it started to come through, And
there's nothing wrong. It's funny, I was accused, I did a talk, and a designer raised her hand and said, why are you picking on gray? Like, I love gray. Gray's a classic color. And I said, I'm not picking on gray. I promise you I'm not. There's nothing wrong with gray. Gray's a great color. It is a classic. It is middle. It's neutral. It's like Switzerland. It's very easy to live with gray. But, it evolves too, and it had its moment in the 80s. I mean, gray was the color du jour in the 80s, along with mauve.
Gray and the mauving of America.
Right. So the question is, where's the next direction in neutral? Because, in these investment pieces, most people are not going to go out and do, bright tangerine. I mean, I would love to, and I posted some fabulous kitchens. But what's the next, phase? Where are we seeing that? Is there a color of choice?
Interestingly, when you look at that and you talk, and they kind of go back and forth between them, because gray's been warming just ever so slightly. Mm-hmm. I launched a color story or color narratives I teach them called beige is not a dirty word. And it really, because we think about it, and a lot of times in design, we think about that like, oh my God, it can't be beige. But I started looking in a deeper way as to what beige was. And this was not just a plain neutral, or what I've always jokingly called a builder beige, sort of this off-whitish sort of color. But beige has all these marvelous connotations. I mean, it has strength, it has softness. If you go to the beach, you can build this big, powerful sandcastle, or you can just have simple little footprints in the sand that the water comes in and washes out, and then you can recreate again. And we have, plush teddy bears that are beige colors, and their softness, and there's cashmere sweaters, and it comes from the earth, so it builds things. There's so much stuff in that it's far more regal and interesting a color, or family, I should say. And what I find really interesting, it's essentially brown. There's this great gamut from the lightest version of it to the deepest brown, and they're all the same. So there's a humanity to beige as well, that we just pick this hue sort of in the middle, but recognize all the value changes of it, which I think is going to make it far more interesting and far more exciting for people to look and go, you know what, beige is not just that. It's far more, far deeper and far more interesting. Exactly. Exactly.
It's not just an off-white. And we were talking even about some of these camels and cognacs and, these beautiful earth tones that we're seeing. Do you think that's sort of a trending direction too?
They're part of it.
Yeah.
They're part of it. I've had images of classic camel hair coats.
Yeah.
So, this is, although we say camel hair coats, we're in our part of the world right now, it's 97 degrees. But,
right, exactly. But it's coming.
Well, and down in the southern hemisphere, it's not. They're experiencing winter, right now, the southern hemisphere. So we have to, and it's something to think about as well when you look at color. It's, there's different seasons on the opposite sides, throughout the year. So we kind of keep that in mind. So it's good. And there's something else that's really interesting. Beige and camels are phenomenal with gray.
Right.
So we look at what we have, and you say it's going to be here for a while. You can easily start to transition into this sort of slightly newer one with pieces you already have. So as a designer, say, I don't have to tear it all out. I can easily evolve this with something else and start moving that direction and put in tangerine, as you said earlier, to make that work with them. So that's what's great about this.
I just posted a kitchen on my Facebook feed, gorgeous, and they did a black island, gray furniture, in the living room, and then this beautiful, very classic, it's a traditional heritage blue uppers, and then a beautiful cognac leather bar stool. So you have something that sort of feels like it is sort of multicolored, but it's multicolored rooted in these earthy tones, and gray is in that mix, and it just looks very now. It looked, like such a beautiful evolution. White subway tile, I was joking, new rules, here's how you do a kitchen, your tops and your bottoms don't have to match, it doesn't have to be a suit, but white subway tile is a classic, and so you sort of see how you're bringing forward the trends that are there, and are still relevant, but putting a new twist on it moving forward. Any other exciting new trends from CMG or not that you're seeing moving forward from, design and color? What drivers do?
I think the interest in the clarity of color. Mm-hmm. We tend to, certainly North America, we tend to pull back, and it's always a little, we'll do that, and then we'll go a little muted. And our discussions are not about muted colors for the most part. They're about moving forward with clarity.
I like that.
Yeah, so it's, which I think is marvelous. So I can say that without telling you exactly what the colors are.
So you're thinking that it's going to be a more clean palette, so to speak, because I'm seeing these sort of muted, earthy, very almost like the rustic, the evolution of farmhouse that's been around.
And there has been this great movement in that. I mean, even when you think of industrial, has become this sort of new, what I was calling fine-tuned industrial, which is much cleaner. It's not grimy, gritty, carts from the warehouse. It's polished and clean. It's like the inside of a Hublot watch. The beautiful workmanship, and you really get the fine-tuned industrial aspect of it. And it's balanced. I mean, we're looking at those. You don't just go full-on bright, because you have to kind of pull yourself back a little bit and go, how am I going to balance this out? And and the word grounded is overused, but it's true. And you do have something that grounds other hues. And it's the same thing with textiles, the same thing with pattern. What do we do? All of those things fall into some of that language.
So again, I'm going to come back to, I love that idea that you're seeing palettes that have color that has more clarity to it, because we want clarity, which makes so much sense given our current circumstance.
And
Are you seeing sort of hyper color Is that going to be coming back or not?
Are you thinking like sort of neonish, that type of hyper color?
How saturated is clarity?
Pretty saturated. I mean, if you think of a color at 100%, we're probably looking at 80 to 85% of that chroma in that color.
Yeah.
So they're strong. I mean, it's recognizable instantly as what the hue is.
Yes.
Which is real exciting.
And then in terms of value, are you seeing them sort of lighter, mid, dark? Where are you seeing them?
Somewhat lighter. I mean, there's not a lot of gray going in them until there is. I shouldn't say gray. It's actually black that goes into it, but you get the gray values of it in between. So it's, and those are the ones that are pulled back to kind of balance them out. Maybe balance is a better word than grounding, but you say, okay, I can't have, like you said, to that space, I can't have all this tangerine, I can't have all of this. But in that space you described, the cognac probably looks fairly bright and bold compared to the other hues that are in there.
But not obnoxious, right? So it definitely, it's funny. I had a professor who used to say, "There's no bad color. There's no ugly color. There's ugly combinations." And the same goes, for beautiful colors, like beautiful combinations. When you put things in combination and you look at a color that's otherwise an earthy color, but you pair it against a cooler palette, it pops.
It's funny. I'm sorry. I had
it really is all how it's perceived next to each other.
And for all of you watching, this is how Stacy and I chat.
Exactly.
And it was actually quoted once. It was kind of funny because someone said like, what colors are wrong? And I thought about it for a moment. I said, there's never really a color. There's no such thing as a wrong color. Just colors done wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
So, which is grammatically incorrect, but it was sort of a play on it. Thinking, every once in a while, it doesn't play correctly, and you've got to pull back and go, here's where it needs to go. I had someone years ago, they wanted yellow in the worst way, and they went out and bought yellow, and they painted their living room, and they hated it.
Yeah.
And everyone else who came in and hated it, he goes, I guess I can't have yellow. I said, no, you can have yellow. You just need a different yellow. This is not the yellow you should have in the space.
Right.
In your historic home in Washington, D.C., with the woodwork, I said, here's where we have to go. And we chose something else, and he's been thrilled with it. And
so talk to me, because you just said a word, and I want to just riff off of that. You said the word historic.
Oh, yes.
And so many of you tuning in right now, or who will tune in later date on YouTube or on our blog, may not know. But Mark has had some exposure to some pretty amazing historic properties. So just, with that as the lead-in, take us through this story and kind of what you were there doing with the color palettes and all of these things.
Well, that was honor and privilege yet again. So I've done 2 official and then 2 offshoots. So I worked with the original Mount Vernon Estate of Colors, which is George Washington's residence outside of Washington, D.C., or Mount Vernon, Virginia. I followed that one working with the Historic Foundation. I actually did the Carolina Lowcountry, which that was interesting because we kind of think of I thought originally the Lowcountry is one area, and I realized it was broken into 3 categories of marsh, village, and beach, because they have different living areas. And then the last one I did when I was sort of still, quote unquote, in corporate paint world was the colors for Nashville, Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
So
what back to George Washington's home, and you were talking about a piece of porcelain.
Oh God, that was so astounding. So I was working with the historian. We're talking about things, and General Washington was an amazing Renaissance man, and marked down everything that went out of the house to Mount Vernon in school. So I'm holding in gloved hands, I'm holding a Zhang Dynasty bowl, and this beautiful coloring on it, and the beautiful patterning, and they're talking about how they have records that it was used to serve Lafayette, or with Lafayette at one point at a dinner. And I sat and I thought the gravity of it was just so amazing. I thought, oh my God, I'm looking at the same thing for inspiration that General Washington looked at years ago when he was doing all these things in the house.
Like the president of this country.
Yeah,
amazing.
I had goosebumps, and I was very quickly like, I have to put this down now, because I just thought
exactly.
I couldn't actually hold it. But the great thing is that the inside rim was this incredible turquoise that wound up on the palette called Porcelain Edge.
I love it.
So So every time I could see that, I know the story of the bowl, and did that. It was just so amazing. In Charleston, in Sullivan's Island, I was taking samples out of all, quote unquote, the beiges, of all the sand colors. And we didn't, we weren't using spectrophotometers on sand to match it, because it seemed not as involved then. So, and unfortunately, we didn't have all the cameras on our phones at the time. I'd love to have a shot of this. But I had all these samples of all these different beiges colors tucked into the sand, and was slowly eliminating the ones that didn't work until I found the one that was the beach color, the sand color at that moment. And I think that wound up a color called Sullivan's Isle, because we were on Sullivan's island at the time, or the beach in Sullivan's at the time.
Right.
But what was really fascinating about it was to find how contemporary now colors that were 200 years old still are. That was an amazing thing. But to learn the stories, to bring it back a little bit, I think that's what we wind up doing for people now. So there were colors that were historically relevant, either within the time period or a reason. Lots of the blues and greens. Blues and greens were really expensive at the time period. So using them meant that you were a person of means.
Right.
So, and they used to say that General Washington liked blues and greens, so there were lots of them in the house. The truth behind it was a way for us to show off our early country's prominence, and that we were ahead of the curve, and all the people who would visit from Europe, oh, look, we have the same colors you do because they're current and contemporary. So even that, the importance of color as a statement within a space was really strong.
When you go back and you say, well, purples were always a color of royalty.
Yep. And
for the same reason.
They told a story, and I still find it important to tell that story with contemporary customers and clients, or in hospitality. No matter what you're doing, you're still you're moving a story forward of where we are into history, into new history.
Yeah, it's an incredible experience to be able to do that. Like you said, to take these little scrapings and to really try to dig into what these colors were, these true historical color palettes. That have fun, but I also just imagine this vision, because we go to the paint store, there's thousands of colors. I know we were talking a little bit of this trend toward editing going forward, making it a little easier for consumers to make a decision. But I just love that picture of you, this imagined picture of Mark at the beach with the little vials, like the perfect sand. When we use something, we go, that's a sandy color, it's kind of the color of sand. Here you are, kind of eyeballing which is the perfect grain of sand to tell that color story. And, for people who are in the industry, you understand it. You understand the lengths you go to get that perfect color, to get that perfect texture, right? That just, like you said, that the camel hair, that perfect color. What is the camel hair? How accurate, how relevant is this? How authentic is the color? How does it best describe? But also, the idea that color and the way we view color, the way we perceive color, is so greatly impacted not only by light, and I talk a lot about that on these episodes, but also by finish. I kind of, as we wrap up our combo, and it always goes fast, just tell us a little bit about this lacquer room that you did, because I know that's like just a piece. It was interesting. It was a residential client. And we had a chat, and he really, really loved that blue. Yeah.
And we had a chat about it, and he said at one point, he goes, okay, everything else is wide open, what we want to do in the house. I really want my study in that blue. And I said, okay, fine. And we were in the house, finally, when the drywall was up, and we could really do a decent walkthrough rather than working on plans. And I stood in front of the room, and I thought, I know what this is going to need to be. And I looked at him, he says, so the blue is non-negotiable. I said, good. In that case, the sheen is non-negotiable. and he went, what do you mean? I said, this needs to go high gloss. So it's actually a 95% gloss paint.
Amazing.
And we did everything. The walls, the ceilings, the built-ins, all the architectural trim and the moldings. It was an adventure with the builder, because it was a new build. To tell him what was going in there, because that drywall work.
Like, thank God, I think that makes it easier. Otherwise, you're really like trying to skim coat walls.
Oh yeah,
it would have been a whole thing to get a sheen like that.
They were able to do a beautiful job on it, and then just pulling the furnishings in and creating this rich study space and this color that could just surround you so beautifully. And blue can feel, sometimes people say blue is essentially a cool color. When you go that deep, it's no longer that cool. It becomes oddly warming in its depth. So it's just been great fun in that space. And the gloss, I think I told you it was a funny story. Was someone had seen the photograph. They said, "Wow, how high is that room? Is that 2 stories high?" And I didn't know what they were talking about. And I looked and I went, "No, that second story of the windows is the reflection in the ceiling."
Right.
Because it's that shiny.
Right. And that's such great advice, because I know people will say, I get questions like that all the time from consumers who are saying, if I paint my room dark, if I paint my ceiling dark, will my room feel smaller?
It's actually quite the opposite. You lose sense of perception as to how the space is.
Right.
So a lot of times the dark ceiling actually makes it feel larger than it is, because you don't really know how high it is. Is it 8 feet? Is it 15? 20?
Yeah. But if you do it in a high gloss, you get the illusion, like it's not quite mirrored ceiling, so you're not going all Elvis on people, but it does give that light reflection. You get that bounce. It
winds up a double effect. So the depth of the color is one thing, the sheen adds even more to it.
Yeah.
No, and I love my clients' work, and there's something in every one of them that I think is marvelous. That one ranks as one of my favorites in all the years I've been doing this. It was just an amazing space.
We will definitely have pictures of various highlights of your portfolio
on
our life-style.net. So this will post, and we'll send out emails to everybody, but definitely follow along so you get to see some of the work we've been describing. And then as our wrap-up, I go lightning round. Quickly. I know, the time goes like this. What's your favorite color?
Pink.
What was that, pink?
Pink.
Okay, I love it.
It's a little subversive. At least it has been for a long time. I always liked it for that, and there's something that's kind of fresh about it. I'm a gardener, so I feel it's part of gardening. It's part of great light at different times of the day. There's just something about it that I've always.
And I always, I try to convince people too. I really believe pink is a gender neutral color.
Absolutely is.
Yeah,
absolutely is.
For sure. Where's the first place you're going to travel when all of this stops?
Munich.
Oh, what's that?
It's family history. It's family, and I can't wait to get back. We can't go right now. We haven't been for a few years, and I cannot wait to get on a plane and go back to Munich and see family.
Yeah,
I think it's the family connection even more than the city. I just want to be able to see my family overseas.
I know. It's not the same to Zoom. It's close, but it's no cigar.
Yeah.
And what about any good books or binge watching?
You know what? It's funny. What I've been binge watching is Frasier.
Okay. That's
I think
we went old school too. We're a little newer, but Glee.
Oh gosh, yeah. Frasier and Niles are somehow my spirit animals. I think it's.
I love it. Yes, I see that. I get it. I see it. It all makes sense now, Mark. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, for spending some time with us on this Wednesday evening of Design Uncensored. Patty's saying, what shade of pink? You are a color person. That's a broad range. So do you have a specific shade? That's our Patty Carpenter. So
hi, Patty.
Over here, yeah. And so we'll answer that in another question. And Patty, we have to get you on the show also. But again, everybody who tuned in and spent time with us tonight, thank you so much for tuning in from wherever in the world you are.